Apple, the trillion-dollar tech giant that revolutionized personal computing, music, smartphones, and even the way we communicate, has always walked a fine line between innovation and exploitation. For decades, the company marketed itself as the champion of simplicity, beauty, and user experience. Think different wasn't just a slogan, it was a cultural revolution. But behind the glass screens and aluminum frames, Apple has long been accused of a different philosophy. Think profit first. And while this obsession with margins and market dominance made Apple one of the most valuable companies in history, it has also led to some of the biggest financial blunders, lawsuits, and PR nightmares in corporate America. At times, Apple's own greed has backfired, costing them billions of dollars, not just in fines and refunds, but in lost trust and damaged reputation. This is the story of how the world's most admired tech brand let its hunger for profit undermine its empire. The cult of control. From the very beginning, Apple's business model was built on control. Unlike Microsoft, which licensed its Windows operating system to countless PC makers, Apple kept everything in-house. Hardware, software, and ecosystem, all tightly locked. This allowed Apple to command premium pricing, and for many years the strategy worked brilliantly. But as Apple grew, so did its appetite. The company wasn't content with selling you a computer or a phone. It wanted to control your apps, your accessories, even your repairs. Every charging cable, every app purchase, every iCloud upgrade, all of it fed into a system where Apple always got a cut. And while this model made Apple immensely profitable, it also created cracks in the empire. The more Apple pushed for profit, the more it alienated regulators, developers, and even loyal customers. Chapter 2. The Battery Scandal. One of Apple's most infamous money grabs came in 2017 when users discovered their older iPhones were deliberately slowing down. At first, Apple denied wrongdoing, but eventually the truth emerged. Apple was throttling performance on aging iPhones to preserve battery life. The explanation didn't sit well with the public. Critics accused Apple of pushing planned obsolescence, deliberately making old phones frustratingly slow to force people to buy new ones. The backlash was swift. Lawsuits piled up in multiple countries. Regulators stepped in. In 2020, Apple agreed to a $500 million settlement in the US, paying some users up to $25 each. In France, regulators fined Apple 25 million euros. Other cases around the world added hundreds of millions more. But perhaps the biggest cost was trust. Apple's carefully cultivated image as the company that puts customers first took a huge hit. For the first time, many loyal fans began to question whether Apple's obsession with profit was undermining the very products they love. The China gamble. Apple's hunger for profit also pushed it into risky global territory. To maximize margins, Apple outsourced much of its manufacturing to China, where labor was cheap and factories could scale at lightning speed. The partnership made Apple the envy of the tech world, but the relationship came at a cost. Over the years, reports emerged of exploitative labor practices in Apple's supply chain, underpaid workers, grueling hours, even tragic stories of suicides at Foxconn factories. Apple promised reforms, but critics argued that the company turned a blind eye as long as profits kept flowing. Then came geopolitics. Rising tensions between the US and China put Apple in a dangerous position. In 2023, Beijing banned government officials from using iPhones. Rumors of future restrictions sent Apple's stock tumbling, wiping $200 billion in market value in just 2 days. Apple's dependence on cheap Chinese labor, a decision rooted in profit margins, had made it vulnerable to political winds far beyond its control. The dongle debacle. Sometimes Apple's greed shows itself not in global politics, but in something as small as a charging cable. For years, Apple has been accused of nickel and diming its customers with accessories. From removing the headphone jack in 2016, forcing users to buy AirPods, to ditching chargers in iPhone boxes in 2020, under the guise of saving the environment, Apple has perfected the art of selling less for more. Consumers weren't fooled. The dongle tax became a meme, as users complained about having to buy endless adapters just to use basic features. While each decision padded Apple's bottom line, it also fueled resentment. By some estimates, Apple saved billions by cutting chargers and headphones from iPhone boxes, but at the cost of alienating millions of buyers. The antitrust avalanche. All of these controversies built toward a perfect storm. Antitrust investigations. Governments around the world, from the US to the EU, India to Australia, launched probes into Apple's business practices. The accusations were similar. Apple was abusing its dominance to crush competition and extract unfair profits. In 2024, the European Commission hit Apple with a €1.8 billion fine for anti-competitive practices in music streaming. US regulators prepared their own lawsuits targeting the App Store. Each case dragged Apple deeper into a legal quagmire, threatening not just fines but forced structural changes that could dismantle its walled garden. In chasing profit, Apple had attracted the one enemy even it couldn't outspend: governments. Innovation or exploitation? Perhaps the most tragic irony of Apple's greed is that it has overshadowed its innovation. For every breakthrough, the iPhone, the iPad, the Apple Watch, there is a story of cost-cutting, profit padding, or monopoly abuse that tarnishes the achievement. Apple could have been remembered purely as the company that revolutionized technology. Instead, it risked being remembered as the company that turned innovation into exploitation, counting the cost. So how much has Apple's greed really cost them? Let's add it up. Battery scandal lawsuits and settlements, over $1 billion. Fines from regulators worldwide, billions more, with cases still ongoing. Lost market value from China bans and supply chain risks, hundreds of billions, though some recovered later. Future revenue at risk from App Store reforms. Estimates suggest $15 to $20 billion annually could vanish. Altogether, Apple's relentless pursuit of profit has already cost them tens of billions, and the number is still rising. The bigger lesson: the story of Apple is not just about one company's greed. It's a warning for the entire tech industry. When innovation takes a backseat to profit, when ecosystems turn into prisons, and when customers become commodities instead of people, the backlash is inevitable. Apple's downfall hasn't arrived yet. The company is still wildly profitable, still a cultural icon. But its mistakes show that even the most powerful brand in the world cannot escape the consequences of greed. Conclusion: the bite of the apple. Apple's logo, a bitten apple, has always symbolized knowledge, temptation, and the price of desire. In many ways, it's a perfect metaphor for the company itself. Apple tempted the world with beauty and innovation, but its own desire for profit has left a bite mark, not just on customers' wallets, but on its reputation. In the end, Apple's greatest enemy may not be Samsung, Google, or Huawei. It may be Apple itself. And as history has shown, empires don't always collapse from outside threats. Sometimes they crumble from within.